All right, Mark. In today's episode of Man vs. World, we're talking about the experts who are labeling freedom as a word for far-right protesters, the single best piece of actionable advice for habit change, the difference between male and female depression, and we've got Louise Perry's case against the sexual revolution.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Nice. Good to get back into this. I think we missed a week or something. So
Yeah, we did. That's right, though.
Time to get back into it. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Man vs. World. I am your anti-escapism coach, Mark Queppet, and we are joined by the illustrious Pete. Pete, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing pretty good. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice at all. I feel a little stuffed up, got like a little cold going, but hopefully it won't interfere with what we're doing today, and my voice isn't too annoying, so... Yeah,
sounds good. Sounds as silky smooth as always. So.
Does it? Okay, good. Because my, you know how it is. Sometimes it's like sounds weird inside of your own head or whatever. Yeah. So had a big week last week. Was doing a lot of stuff for the business. I'm really excited to share a lot of the stuff that's going to be coming up. Probably in the next Man vs. World or two, we'll really start opening up the behind the scenes on what's going on here, because I'm very excited about the direction of the Self-Mastery Club and everything we're doing here. So that'll be fun. In other news, my daughter Avila, she turned 4, and that was fun. We had like a big old party for her, and that was sweet. The only thing I wish was that there's more little kids there, but no one else in my family has kids yet. So it's just like her running around and asking everybody to play with her, which was nice. That didn't just have to be me. Don't get me wrong, I love playing with her, but man, she's a machine. She will play all day, every day, and she's hilarious. Like some of the stuff she says just cracks me up. This morning, she likes to put on her own makeup, and which she does a terrible job at, but it's cute. And she did one eye green, eyeshadow green. The other one she did purple. And my wife asked her, "Oh, makeup looks really nice. What do you think of it?" She said, "Oh, well, the green one's for Hulk." And then my wife's like, "Well, what's the purple one for?" She's like, "Oh, that's just because it's fabulous." And I'm just like, where do you get this stuff? She's a little girl all the way through. So, okay, let's go ahead and get into this. What's this first one we got here?
So the first thing I wanted to show you today was Joe Rogan on the experts who are labeling freedom a word for far-right protesters. Let's go ahead and check it out.
Freedom, far-right protesters. Okay, sounds like that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Canada is so fucking wild right now. It's such a really crazy place. Here it is. Why the word freedom is such a useful rallying cry for protesters. The word has become common amongst far-right groups. So by putting that far right in there, far right, but there's no indication whatsoever that those truckers in Canada were far right. A lot of those are working class people that just did not like the idea that they were being forced to do this medical procedure in order to keep their job. And so they label them as far right. Yeah. Trudeau personally labeled them as racists and misogynists. Just so he could disparage them. Yeah. Just so whatever they say doesn't mean anything. Yeah. So this is what they're doing here with the term freedom, which is one of the most basic tenets for human rights, your liberty as a human being, your ability to express yourself, your ability to talk about things, to protest, to do what you want.
That's what
freedom
I mean.
is so fucking important.
Yes, just more psyops from our benevolent dictators. It's always fun. It's always fun to hear the new angle. And what they're trying to do with all this kind of stuff is really, when they say, "Oh, freedom, it's a far right rallying cry," what they're really saying is anyone who disagrees with us is evil, because that's what far right means, right? Because far right means evil. And I don't really even know what technically is far right. It seems like Joe Rogan's considered far right now, and he's definitely not. So it's like, actual far right, like, neo-Nazis and shit like that. Sure, let's go ahead. We'll call that evil. But like, you gotta define your terms here a little bit better. And they just want to smear anyone who just doesn't want to bow down to this top-down sort of authority thing. And Canada kind of scares me, honestly, what they're doing. And I don't know if they really have. I don't know enough about the Canadian legal system, but I know they don't have like actual freedom of speech. So them starting to do stuff like this is a little bit scary. But what it is sad to me that they're like really forcing the people that they do kind of have on their side, like the people who are kind of just, generally brainwashed and stuff like that. Like a lot of those people, they're not bad people. I have people that I love who think that CNN is the beacon of truth, right? And they just got caught. They got caught in a bubble, and they're not bad people. They haven't exercised their critical thinking skills perhaps in the most rigorous way. And so, they see these people, these talking suits, these beacons of authority, and they just assume that, hey, what they say is right. And the problem is, like, it's taking these people and it's driving them into this weird kind of corner to the point where it's like, oh, if you say freedom, oh, there's something wrong with you. Or, oh, if you've got an American flag, well, then you're definitely far right. And it's like, come on, like what is going on here? It's like this world is, it's scary. And I know that a huge amount of people just like blow this stuff off as like, yeah, it's obviously this is what they're doing. And you can see right through it. Like, for me, for example, it's like I see that stuff. It doesn't even like really move anything inside of me because, of course, that is what they would say. But it does matter because there are going to be continuously more and more severe consequences from this. Like pre-COVID, yeah, you could write me off as like a, being maybe, you don't need to be that worried about it. Oh, it's nothing really bad's going to happen. But then you see, okay, if there's an actual serious event, an actual like disaster, like shit actually hits the fan. Oh, this stuff actually really does matter. It really does. Because if they start shaping the way that you think by redefining words, well, then, they kind of control the full flow of energy in the country. You see this all the time in the sexuality space, the redefining of women, or for example, the complete removal of the definition of a woman. That has dramatic effects, especially when it comes down to, well, what kind of rights does a parent have over a child who perhaps, they want to, they think that they're the opposite sex or whatever it is, right? Like this kind of stuff has serious consequences. And as easy as it is to just blow this stuff off, you have to you gotta continue to stoke that little flame of indignation, because if you just become fully apathetic to this process, completely to the point where it's like, oh, the crazies are talking again, clown word, and you just like keep it to your, Twitter feed comments or, private comments with friends, then they're winning. They're winning because they meaning the monolithic left, they control all the media channels. And so the only way that there's going to be any sort of counter narrative is if the sane people speak up. I've talked about this before, but there is a book out there called The Silence of Adam, and it talks about the fundamental failing of man. It can be traced all the way back to the story of Adam and Eve, and basically pins it all on the fact that Adam didn't speak up. When Eve went to go, take a bite of the apple and offered it to him, he didn't say anything. It wasn't like, that's not good. Right? He just took the apples, like, and maybe he knew it was bad. The assumption is that he did, and he just went along with it because he wanted to get a little poontang. And I think there's definitely some element of that going on too, right? Like there's this whole big thing where it started with feminism, and I guess in some sense communism, but then it got like this whole like super woke agenda. It came out of the embers of feminism, mixed with some communism stuff, and then it infiltrated the universities, right? And so women, I think, in general, are susceptible to this stuff simply because they're the ones primarily targeted with it. Now, the only way it's gotten to the point to where it is now is because I think, maybe not the only way, the only reason, but a big reason is because guys, they have girls that are indoctrinated with this stuff, and they be like, oh, she's cute. Yeah, I'll agree with her. Doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm trying to get some. And so it's like, I don't think I'm shoehorning it here when I say that in order to protect ourselves against this kind of stuff, a man needs to have a level of sexual self-mastery. Because if he's unwilling to tell these women and the men who are now trying to get in on it, that a lot of the stuff they say is crazy, then it's just going to keep getting crazier. And that's what we've seen progressively. It hasn't gotten better. Yes, I guess, mainstream stock has fallen, but, they're still in power. Trudeau's still running Canada. It's not like they've lost too much ground, okay? And the same, you can say just as bad stuff about, our own United States here. So, I don't know, man. Pete, do you have any thoughts on this?
You mentioned the American flag, and that reminded me, I think I saw a TikTok clip or something where this guy was talking about how he had a girl over, and he finally got her over, and she walked into his room, and he had a giant American flag over his bed. And she's like, oh, you have an American flag over your bed? What are you, some kind of like Nazi? And just like refused to sleep with him.
That's interesting. Well,
I thought that was hilarious.
That's funny because, you think about that. It's like, it comes right back to my point where it's like at the point of sexual selection, it's like, are you bowing down to this woke feminist agenda? If you're not, well then, sexual access might be denied to you. And we see this sometimes too with, I can't remember like the specifics of the last one, but they do it all the time where it's like, it was the overturning of Roe versus Wade and sending it back to the states. It wasn't making abortion illegal. It was just sending it back to the states. And all these women are like, sex strike, time to have a sex strike to show men what's what. And it's like, that's really what it comes down to. It's like they're trying to, like, they're saying like, all right, I want you to sacrifice your principles. I want you to sacrifice your rationality on the altar of sexual pleasure. And frankly, it's working. It's working. Like, even if it's, not for the generally unattractive women who are offering the sex strike idea, it's to porn. Right? Like, it's like, I will sacrifice my morals and values and understanding of right and wrong at the sake of, or at this altar of immediate sexual gratification. And so it's like, yeah, guys got to speak up. I think that's like the practical side of it. But like prior to that, the deeper inner spiritual work for us as men is to really focus on mastering ourselves, really focus on bringing all of our faculties, all of our behaviors, all of our speech, all of our action into alignment with our highest morals and values. And this is not an easy task, particularly in this world of incredibly cheap and easy to access high stimulation pleasure. But, if you don't do this stuff drowns you. This stuff, it'll swallow you up. And it'll swallow the whole culture up. And so that's, man versus world in a nutshell for you. So, all right. What else we got here?
So the next thing I wanted to show you was behavior change specialist, I believe it's pronounced Sharu Izadi, shares her best actionable advice for habit change. Let's go ahead and check out what she has to say.
From the person you were then to now, was there, if someone can relate strongly to that situation, where you're having that gastric band removed in an emergency op, and they're looking at the person you are now, what's the piece in between, the actionable piece in between that they can, or even the first step in that journey? Is it going and seeing a therapist? Is it?
The first actionable step is practicing listening into the way you speak to yourself. I think ultimately it comes down to that. I think listen in. And the great news is, if you try to change a habit, however small, it's an incredibly effective way to turn up the volume. Listen in on what's going on. Inquire compassionately, curiously. What am I telling myself? What are my assumptions about myself in this situation? What are my assumptions about what I deserve? Curiously, write them down. Think about whether you'd say that to someone else. And then start thinking about where it came from. Start seeing whether it's true. Just start curiously inquiring, because I think that's the best thing you've got.
I think she's right. And I would say this kind of self-talk thing, it doesn't even need to be just listening. It's also the way that you actually speak into yourself. And self-talk has always been at the core of all the kind of work that I do with men, because it's basically like that's your operating system for how you live your life. But we can flesh it out, I think, a little bit more, because the self-talk, that's like the tactic. That's like where the rubber hits the road. And, he asked for that. He asked for, what's the practical piece. But there's more to it. Just because you understand the practical piece doesn't mean you know how you want to actually do the practical piece. Like, how should you talk to yourself and everything like that? Well, it's like, all right, if we're going to take it deeper into the next layer, which I would say is like go from tactic, go one step deeper, we got the strategy. Well, what is it we're trying to accomplish with our self-talk? I would say that in your self-talk, what you're trying to do is you're trying to heal the schism between your rational and emotional mind. Okay, I call it the split mind problem. And I had to really understand this when I was trying to help guys quit porn and quit their escapism behaviors and stuff like that, because basically, like, we got this Jekyll and Hyde sort of dynamic inside of us where, the porn addict, for example, one part of his brain is like, yeah, let's use porn. It's great. I really want it. It sounds really fun. And then this other part that says, it's kind of ruining our life. It screws up our brain. It's, going against our morals, all this kind of thing. And so it's like we got these two warring factions inside of ourselves, and then they end up just kind of taking turns dominating each other. So it's like we'll repress that part that just wants easy pleasure or whatever it is. We'll lock it in a cage so we can be productive for a little while. But then in a moment of weakness, that part breaks free, and then it represses the rational side. And then we go out and we engage in some kind of hedonistic bender of some sort, and this could be anything from, a bender with, cocaine and prostitutes, or it could just be something more mild where it's like you ate a whole pizza while watching Netflix all day instead of doing anything that was remotely useful to you, and you'd feel crappy about it afterward. Okay. So that's all the result of this split mind, because these sides are not really talking to each other. They're not really communicating. They're not really trying to find that common ground. And I believe really the way to find that common ground is we want to have a distribution of our energy between short-term pleasure and long-term fulfillment. Okay. I think there's this big mistake being made in the self-development sphere, particularly in the self-development sphere targeted toward men, where it's like this idea of the grind set, Sigma male grind set. Bleh. And it's just like, doesn't really work super well. You can make progress like that. And some people, if you can make it a full permanent lifestyle, yeah, you will rock it ahead, but you will not be happy. I know this. I've been this guy, and I've worked with lots of guys who have been highly successful embracing this mentality. And the reason is because you're always living for tomorrow. You're always living for that next thing, that next level in your career, that next physique goal, that, new habit that you got to build, whatever. And if all of your intentional energy goes to that, well, then you never actually have enjoyment in the day. You never have enjoyment in your week. It's all waiting in some ethereal future. And as you keep doing that, you just get burnt out on it. You'll find your motivation will wane, and often people will just go into these big pendulum swings between kind of like, it's just what I was talking about before, that split mind, but on a macro level, where it's like you'll fall into a big slump, and then you'll get yourself real worked up, and you'll go really hard, and then you'll fall into a slump again. And that's not the way to do it. Okay, the way to do it, I believe, well, to give you the answer, we got to go one layer deeper. We did the tactic, that's a self-talk. The strategy is heal the split mind. And then the philosophy underneath all of that is your dignity. Okay, you have to believe that yes, status matters, because that is your physical status, your sexual status, your social status, your career status, your financial status, all this kind of stuff. Those things are major components in the quality of your life. So it matters, but it doesn't define you. It doesn't define your worth. You have a worth that is intrinsic, that is unconditional, that is separate from those things. So even if your status goes up, doesn't make you any intrinsically more valuable, any intrinsically more lovable. If your status goes down, it doesn't make you any worse. It doesn't mean you got to hate yourself. It doesn't mean you need to reject yourself. All right. And so when we recognize this, then we realize, oh, there actually needs to be this balance. Yes, I need to work toward my future goals because that's a good gift to me. So I got to put some of my intentionality into that kind of stuff. But if I put all of my energy there, I'm basically just objectifying myself. I'm basically saying, hey, you're not even allowed to enjoy your life until you earn X amount of status. That's devaluing yourself. That's saying that you are just an object whose worth is only defined by your status. Okay. What if we threw that away? Okay. What if we said, all right, even if I never reached any of my goals, I'm still good. I'm still worthy of love. I'm still worthy of actually having a good life. You do that, well, then that means you got to split that energy. Part of it goes to the future long-term goals. Part of it goes to enjoying now. And this is a thing that I think is absolutely essential. It means that you need to be like, when you're planning your week out, for example, planning your days out, yeah, write down what you want to get done that's going to serve those long-term goals. But also write down what you're going to do to enjoy that week, to enjoy that day. Because if you learn how to construct a life that is productive and enjoyable, that's the one that's going to finally remove you from this crazy pendulum swing between trying and then like being this like hedonistic sort of pleasure seeker. All right. Until you do that, until you marry these things, your mind will stay split and you can keep oscillating. You're never going to be able to permanently ascend to that next level of operation. So yeah, that's the way I would approach it.
I like that. That gives it some layers to it. You know, most people just think, oh, self-talk, that sounds super lame. I'm not gonna do that. if they do it, it's like, you know, I don't even know. You'd know better than me because you've worked with a ton of guys around this. What's the average guy's response to self-talk as a general idea? It's just kind of like a whatever sort of thing until you usually tie it into a problem that they really care about solving. So, right. For example, if it's a guy who really wants to quit porn, he doesn't care about self-talk until I say, well, what was going on in your head when you decided to relapse? And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, does that matter? It's like, yes, of course it matters. Yes, that's literally what determines what path you choose. And a lot of times that self-talk, it happens unconsciously. But as you build the self-awareness, you'll see that, oh, there are these thoughts that are passing kind of beneath the surface. And you, through this awareness, you unearth them, you bring them up, and you're able to analyze, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And, you know, at that point, guys realize, oh, shoot, this is really powerful. Because it is. It's like your internal narratives, it's the code that runs your life. So it's like if you have a piece of software that's misbehaving, what do you got to do? If it's throwing off bugs and errors and crashing and doing the wrong things, well, you got to get into the code. You got to figure out what the heck's going on. It's misbehaving because it's coded to behave that way. So like, you know, same thing goes with our self-talk. It's like we behave the way we do because of the way we think. You want to change that, or you want to change your life, well, then you got to change the way that you think. And that, you know, self-talk is the most effective way, especially when combined with journaling. And so if you want to learn more about exactly how to do that, like with more, you know, fleshing all this stuff out more, then make sure you check out the training and the link below where I get super in depth on some of that stuff. Awesome. All right. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is this DM I got from Bruce Rain from the club, who says, hey, Pete, I was wondering if I could get Mark's take on dating in a Man vs. World episode. Specifically, if he was single again, how would he go about developing a meaningful relationship like his current marriage in the modern world? How would he navigate hookup culture, toxic women, and getting addicted to sex in a relationship? Not much advice out there on developing meaningful relationships with women, so I thought he'd have some insights.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I haven't really been on the dating market for quite a while now. I've been with my wife since I was 19, minus like a few little breaks in college. But I still know, I'm pretty certain this is how I would handle it, is I would kind of like apply my marketing lessons that I've learned. Because like, you know, in building an online business and stuff, like you have to learn marketing. And one of the keys to marketing is to make sure that you're marketing to the right people. In fact, that's probably the most important thing, is that you're targeting the right person. And there's ways that you target it. It's like you learn what that person's looking for, what are their problems, what are the things they want, where are the, you know, how do they associate, how do they talk, you know, where do they hang out, and you try and put your message in front of them, and you try and you cater it to appeal to them. You know, one of the worst ways to market is to try and make yourself appealing to everyone. Don't do that. It's a recipe for failure. You're going to end up being appealing to no one. All right. And so if you're looking for a more meaningful relationship, then you have to market yourself toward women who are also looking for a more meaningful relationship. So here's where I'm not 100% certain, like, but from what I can gather, things like Tinder and stuff like that, that's not necessarily where people go for a long-term relationship. I know there are some dating apps that are far more like, you know, focused on doing things like that. Like, I don't know, eHarmony might be one, or I don't know if that's big anymore, or there's other ones that are more like looking for a long-term relationship rather than a hookup. So just start on that platform. And then it's like the way that you present yourself. You know, some guys are afraid to say, oh, I'm afraid to like say I'm looking for a long-term commitment because, you know, maybe that'll scare some women off. It's like, yes, those are the ones you want to scare off. So make it like, make what you want as upfront and center as possible. You know, advertising your profile, looking to get married. Okay. dating to find my wife. And yeah, some people are going to think that's corny and lame, but guess who's not going to think that? The other women on there who are looking to find their husband. They're like, oh, him. I like him. You know, let's at least talk to him. Okay. And then from there, it's like bringing more of yourself to the table, right? Like if you're a Christian, if you're looking to date another Christian, do that. If you're, you know, a Muslim looking to find another Muslim, do that. Same kind of deal. And then you want to go, like, if you can, do in-person stuff, right? Like do, like, where do these people go? If you're, you know, for example, right-leaning, maybe you go to something where it's like a young Republicans convention. I don't even know if that stuff exists. I assume it does. I saw Jordan Peterson live one time, and the audience was pretty split. It was probably like 60-40 men to women, and all the women there, they were pretty well put together. They looked nice. They're sharp. It's like if you're a woman, you're going to see Jordan Peterson, and you like Jordan Peterson, well then, hey, that'd be a place to find people. You know, it's like, obviously he's not coming around to everybody's backyard and stuff like that, but that's the general idea. It's like, you know, if you're a Christian man, maybe you got to start going to church or going to, you know, get involved in your church community, you know, go to the cookouts and the stuff they have like that, you know, start socializing in the circles where you're likely to find a woman that shares similar values and morals to yourself. And then probably the biggest one, the thing that most guys are completely unwilling to do, but I think would probably be the most important part of it, is that if I was going to be dating, looking for a wife, is I would not have sex with the women that I was dating. And I would date a lot of women at once, at least in the initial stages. So I would be very upfront, be like, you know, hey, I'm looking for a wife. And because of that, I am talking to multiple women. But here's the deal is I'm not doing anything sexual with these women. And the reason for that is because then it makes it real easy to do both of those, to one, date multiple women. Because if you're doing that, you're not hooking up with anyone. I don't think too many women would have an issue with that. If they do, then they might be a little too jealous for you. But if they, the other thing then, perhaps even more valuable, or definitely more valuable, other than just being able to do numbers, I think, morally, is you can then cut it off real easily. Because if you're hooking up with a woman and then you cut it off with her, that's painful if you've got any soul left in you. If your pair bonding mechanism has not been utterly destroyed, then having sex with the woman then makes it far more difficult to break up with her. And one of the things I think that slows down guys' ability to find the right woman is that he keeps sleeping with the wrong woman, and then he ends up spending way too much time with her because he feels bad to end it with her, because he's built this bond. And maybe he can't even see that she's the wrong woman because they're having sex. Because sex, like, it really does, it patches things up. It glosses over, some tough things. Like neurochemically, it's just like when you're in that pair bonded state with someone, you're much less likely to see their faults and their issues and that sort of thing. And this is a wonderful power to have in the context of a marriage, but it's a very bad power to employ when you're looking for a marriage. And so, I definitely do that. And maybe, after I found someone I really liked, then I would, cut off, seeing multiple other people and be more connected with that person and whatnot, and take it more monogamously. But that's generally the strategy that I think I would employ. And I think there should be more people who are doing that.
Makes total sense. And, this next clip here kind of goes along similar lines, because I came across this clip from Alex Ramosi where he was talking about his marriage, and he quoted, well, I'll just show you the clip. I'll let him explain.
It was in front of a crowd of college kids. And he said, so if you could only have one character trait that you would look for in a spouse, what would you look for? People were like brains and beauty or character, loyalty, right? And he's like, you don't want any of that stuff. You know what you want? Low expectations. That's how you create a marriage that lasts. He was being incredibly serious, but also tongue in cheek at the same time. But I think part of that process, at least how we approached it, was that we were probably the least Hollywood version of a relationship. It was very much like, does this make sense? And I think because of that approach, big picture, neither of us came in expecting the other person to save us. I don't need you to make me happy. I prefer it, but like I can continue to live my life and the other person can too, then the expectations are significantly lower. The fact that Layla never tried to change me and still hasn't throughout our whole relationship, I think is one of the biggest reasons why like you've been good, because like I resist anyone who tries to change me very hard. And so low expectations and leading from values has been how we've just used as our compass. And then like we accept the waxes and wanes that occur during the natural shifts of time. Warren Buffett.
So I like the idea. I don't like the language that he's using. I don't think low expectations is the right way to phrase it. I think it's like I think he's more on it when he says you can't go into the relationship expecting them to change, like save you or change you or like make your, like fix your life kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, low expectations for how they fix your life. I can go with that. But I think there does need to be high hopes that the person can be a great partner, right? And I think you should have hopes for that. But expectations is probably, the wrong word for it, right? Like if I'm expecting someone to do something, then that means that I'm going to get disappointed at them when they don't. And yeah, we don't want to go into a relationship with this kind of thing. It's like, oh, you do this or else. Oh, you do this or else I'm not going to be okay with it. And I see this mistake people make where they marry someone in hopes of who they will become. But you really got to marry someone being willing to stay with them, even if they never change. Because like that's when the contract was made. It's like, hey, I'm deciding that you right now, as you are good enough to marry, right? And so I don't know if that's low expectations or not, but like I just think that that's honesty. It's just about like the willingness to take someone as they are. And things will get hard at different times in your marriage. Like any marriage is going to be tested. And so it's like, can you allow someone else to be human in such incredibly close proximity to you? And that's a hard thing to do because sometimes our humanity can be ugly. It can be painful. It can downright tear the heart right out of your chest with how rough it can be. But that's what love is the willingness to say yes to all of that, the at least the possibility of it, right? And so, yeah, I mean, like, I've heard people say that, like, I don't know who has said it, but I know it's a fairly common sentiment that I think is accurate, is the idea that, like, when you marry someone, it's not just like a one-time decision. It's something that has to be continuously decided upon. You have to continuously decide to stay married. And I think a lot of marriages fail because people don't have that mentality. They have this idea of like, oh, well, I felt out of love. It's like, well, after a certain point, after the infatuation kind of honeymoon phase is over, you're going to have to still decide to be with that person, because I think some people, they chase that initial high that comes with, meeting a person, especially if you're having sex right away. Like there is this huge spike of intense emotion. And I think some people make the mistake of thinking that that is love. No, it's not love. That's infatuation. That's, a neurochemical spike designed to drive reproductive behavior. Okay. That's not love. And so when that disappears, who's left there? What's left there? And what are you going to choose to create there? And if you just decide to stop creating it, well, then yeah, it's going to fall apart. So really, marriage to me is the commitment to continuously do the work to fall in love and to stay in love. And that's something that you can do. And it's not always going to be easy, but what do you want more? What do you want more than a true, deep, unconditional, intimate, loving connection with someone? Is there anything else that's, would be better? If there is, then probably shouldn't be getting married because it's going to take everything to really make it work right. And if you do it, well, then it's worth it and more, especially, if you're blessed with the ability to have children and stuff like that, because that's really a next level kind of fulfillment.
All right, next up, the problem with treating male depression like female depression. Let's go ahead and see what Chris Williamson has to say.
Men, they don't so much need love, they want respect. If they had to choose between love and respect from their mate, they would choose respect. Women need love. They want to be loved and adored and everything else. Men, different.
So
I would push back against that. I've heard people say that before. Really? Yeah. I think that respect is just a form of love. And
right.
Like women, what they want more is attention. They want like someone to like enter into their world, care about their feelings, and like provide for them. Okay, I would just say like that. I don't think women want love, men want respect. I think they both want love. Men value the respect more. Women value like maybe the adoration and attention more. But that's
while you have that paused, it's interesting you say that because there was I heard a story of some church relationship conference thing that they had, and they sent out these little pieces of paper to everybody to take a little survey, and the questions for the women was, how much do you feel like your husband respects you? And all the women rated it very high. And then they said, how much does your husband love you? And they rated it low. And men did the opposite. They rated that their wife loved them, but didn't respect them. And interestingly, I don't know the exact scripture, but it's a biblical principle that it says, men, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And it tells women to respect their husbands, which is the opposite of what their natural tendency is to do. Men often show love by respect. Women not necessarily so much. So I thought that was really interesting.
That's an interesting thing. I still think it's messed up semantics around love, but it seems like generally that's what people like I think women, when they say love, it's like, I don't know, intimacy, willingness to sacrifice. I don't know. It's something that needs to get unpacked further, I think, but that's a cool little point there. All right, let's continue with this.
A psychotherapist called Adam Lane Smith on my podcast, and he said that male depression gets treated like female depression. Men are made to feel loved and accepted when all they want to do is feel capable and powerful. He used this example of the Blitz in World War II. Before the war started, there were these psychiatric wards, and they had patients. These patients had been totally comatose, unresponsive. Then the Blitz starts. So there were fires, and there were injuries all over London, and there were ambulances and fire engines, and there was no one to drive them. These men got up and started driving fire engines and ambulances. These men that had been unresponsive for years and years and years. Give a man a purpose and the ability to achieve it, and he will crawl over broken glass with a smile.
Men, they don't.
I love that. That's powerful. That's powerful shit there. Yeah, I think that's true. It's like men need a mission. You need a mission. If you don't have a mission, then what the heck do you got, right? Like, and the world has not done a good job of equipping men to find and follow their missions. I think one of the biggest ways they've done this is by destroying like the courtship process for men, because that's been kind of traditionally one of the main missions for men, is to, get a girl, have a family, provide for that family. That's hard to do now. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to be out on your own as a man in your 20s and be able to provide for a family. That's hard, because with inflation and everything like that, it's like, the boomers like to talk shit on us and everything on these younger generations, but it's like, yeah, I mean, you guys could like work like a mediocre job and be able to buy a single family home. That's quite difficult to do now, unless you're living in a rather undesirable area. So it's screwed guys up in that way. It's like, ruined sexual culture. So, it's makes it more difficult in regard to being able to find quality women who are interested in marriage. It makes it more difficult because, women are getting sucked into all kinds of insane vanity with social media. Men are getting completely sucked into pornography and porn culture. And so with that screwing up the whole marital connection, men then lose one of their primary missions. And what's the right move? Just wait around till there's another like world war, so you have a purpose again? No, because like war is horrendous, and modern war is just going to get even worse. It's just, if you've seen any of the footage from the Ukraine-Russia war, it's like, is that where you want to find your purpose? Sure as hell I don't. Okay, so like the way I see it for most guys is your mission is to become competent, capable, master yourself so that you can find a good woman. There are good women out there, okay? And there's not any. Yeah, there are. You just haven't done the work, or you haven't improved yourself enough to get one of them. So do that, okay? If you quit the porn, you'll actually see way more of them than you could have seen previously, because the porn will morph your sexual tastes and it'll cause you to be attracted to women who are not really a good fit for you. So do that. You have a mission. And I just think that we haven't been taught to see it, and our schooling system has taught men to see themselves as like this cog in a machine. That's what school teaches you how to be a good little worker bee, working for the hive mind. Okay. No, like throw that shit off. Okay. Start thinking about, what do you really want out of life? And it's going to be terrifying because you're not going to know what the fuck to do. Okay. But what you got to do is you got to start going through your options. Make a list, all right? Some of them will sound terrible, okay? Just cross them off. Some of them sound, maybe, I don't know, move that to another list, okay? And then once you got a list of things that are like kind of in the maybe category, start thinking about, well, what would it look like if I pursued this, right? And you just got to keep breaking it down until you find something like, oh, all right, I'm willing to take this step, even if it's just looking for more information, getting a new certification, whatever it is. All right. There is a path out there for you, but it's not going to be handed to you. That's not the way our society works anymore. Modern society has removed so much of our core like survival struggles that our ancestors had. Them just getting through the winter was freaking a nightmare. Okay. We don't have to deal with that shit. But the trade-off is we now don't have a clear path to purpose, all right? Like, in the past, it was clear what it meant to be a man. And there was a path laid out right there in front of you. Your whole community expected it of you, and they would tell you how to do it, at least according to that culture, all right? We've lost all of that. So now while our basic survival is brain dead simple, okay, the other part isn't. That's the part where the adventure lies for you, and that's where you got to be putting your energy.
Man, that's a lot of work, Mark. I don't know. I think I'd rather just sit in my room and fantasize about another war or something. I don't get those guys.
You mean everyone who's playing Call of Duty?
Well, I mean, I know guys who. I actually know a guy who is funny. If he ever watches this, I love you, bro. But it was funny because we were working out at the park, and he's like, oh man, I can't wait for something to happen so we can get in a tank and go blow some people up. I'm like, that sounds horrible. Why do you want to do that?
Well, to be honest, like that's how I was when I was younger. It's because that it's that natural thumos in men. It's that desire to be part of meaningful things, to play a meaningful role, to go like take risks, kick ass, do that kind of stuff. And I don't think that's bad. I think that's good. I think it needs to be tempered by maturity and the realization of, oh shit, like war actually sucks so hard. Like so bad.
Yeah.
And if you watch some of the more serious war movies, I don't see how you can avoid understanding that. But even though it's like, even then, it's like some guys, I think that would still be an upgrade in their life. Even if they were in war and it was hell, it would be a preferable hell to like the self-induced oblivion of escapism that a lot of guys find themselves in, of just working some shit meaningless job and then escaping to some shit meaningless like escapism in the evenings.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, that's comfortable, but that's its own kind of hell. And at least if you were out in a war or whatever, at least you'd have the purpose of fighting for your own survival at the very least, maybe even with some brotherhood and hopefully with some, at least a shred of moral justification for the sake of the war. But yeah, so it's like, I don't think that's completely a naive sentiment, but it's just, it's sad that this is still like the state of the world today, that we need to be having these kind of conversations. But I guess the world's always going to have things that are tragic going on in it. So all we could do is try and make it less so over time.
I guess you're right. Yeah. All right, last but not least, podcast listener Steve sent me this clip from an episode of the Jordan Peterson podcast titled "The Case Against the Sexual Revolution" with Louise Perry. Let's go ahead and check it out.
The phrase that I use in the book to describe this exact phenomenon, where you on the one hand have hypersexual public life, you can walk down any street and see women in lingerie on posters or watch TV, and there's very explicit sex scenes, etc. So on the one hand, we've had this amazing ramping up of sexuality in public life. But on the other hand, exactly as you say, we have what's sometimes called the sex recession, the fact that people are having sex later, less frequently. I think what's happening generally is people are having probably more casual sex, but they're having sex less frequently. So when they are having sex, it's more likely to be casual, but they're not forming these long-standing relationships. And the term that I use in the book is cultural death grip syndrome, taken from the quasi-medical term death grip syndrome, which is used by compulsive porn users to describe the physical experience of impotence when you use too much porn. You get to the point where you actually can't be aroused either physically or psychologically in real life because you use so much porn. And I think cultural death grip syndrome is the counterpart to that, where on the one hand, we have this astounding availability of sexual stimuli at the click of a button at any moment. Anything that you can imagine is available on the internet immediately. And that seems to be demotivating people to actually seek out meaningful sexual relationships, which in the long term are vastly better for us in every possible way. But we have a culture enabled by technology, which is very, very short term in every way.
Mm. Don't you love that like refined British accent?
I do.
I could listen to that all day. It's so nice. I don't like the low class one though.
Oh, crikey. that thing.
I think crikey's Australia.
Oh yeah, it is. Right.
Luke will smack you for that one.
Yeah, I will.
But she's got a great point. I think it's interesting. She's it's funny she knows about death grip stuff. Because I only thought like people who are really, I guess she must have done some research into like the porn addiction stuff. Because for context, the death grip syndrome is when guys use so much porn that they can only get sexual pleasure if they are, jerking themselves off and using like a real tight grip. It's like basically they need to apply like a super intense amount of stimulation to their little Johnson in order to feel something, as it were. And then guys who get into this position, they're screwed in terms of actual sexual relationships because regular sex they don't feel anything. It doesn't provide any pleasure, and they can't stay hard, and it becomes this big problem for them. And so our point is that, yeah, we're so overstimulated in our modern sexual culture that our ability to feel, I guess, sexual connection in general is really damaged. And like I I don't know if that's really the case. I don't know if it's the reason that I don't know if it's the sexual overstimulation is the reason behind the lack of more frequent sex. I don't know if that was the argument she was making, was that like this sexual overstimulation is the reason behind why there's such a decline in sexual activity.
Seems like she was maybe offering that as a potential reason.
I think it's more of just hookup culture in general. Like, because hookup culture doesn't lend itself to long-term relationships, and it's actually the long-term relationships that produce the highest frequency of sex. Like a healthy long-term relationship, you have more sex. Like, I'm pretty sure most of the studies show that people in good, healthy marriages, they have the most sex. I think I saw I can't remember who it was. I'd have to look into this. Because this could be really wrong, but I think I saw a stat saying that, like, you know, the more conservative couples, like not just like Christian or whatever, but like Christian, Muslim, even like Hindu cultures, like any time of like more traditional religious culture, they have more sex, lower divorce rates, higher levels of happiness. Because, and it makes sense. It's like if you have to go through this whole big song and dance every single time you're going to have sex because you're into one night stands, well, yeah, you're just not going to have sex as much, because it's like a person only has so much time to text, to set up dates, to go out and party, get drunk, and then stumble back home for some, sloppy sex, And I'm sure there are outliers. They're the guys at the top of the, the popular sexual marketplace who have, a huge amount of sex because they basically have a harem of willing women. But that's not trickling down to the average guy. That's actually screwing the average guy and the average woman, I would say. So yeah, it's a sad state of affairs. But it doesn't need to be like this, because just like how I'm aware of this and I'm telling you guys, and there's all these guys who are becoming aware of this kind of stuff, there's plenty of women who are aware of this too. I think this counterculture of like sexual, what do we want to call it? I hate the word chastity because that has such like a crappy connotation, like a very prudish connotation, but it's more of like, let's call it sexual maximalism. All right. I think that's some better branding. It's like, for the people who want to have the most meaningful, satisfying, intimate sexual experiences, well, they know that the best way to do that is to not have a bunch of casual sex. And the people who acknowledge this, the sexual maximalists of the world, or, the chaste among us, I think that the movement toward this kind of thinking will increase as society continues to become more lonely, dysfunctional, and as more and more women go through their mid to late 30s to 40s, not being able to settle down, have kids, that sort of thing. I think within 5 to 10 years, we're going to start seeing a big movement among women decrying the, what do we want to call it? The crass term for it is riding the cock carousel of in their 20s and late teens, because that's what pretty much culture says right now. It's like, hey, you're a pretty woman. What you should do is go around and have a whole bunch of sexual partners and focus on your career. Ooh. And then you like reach, 30, 40 in there, and all of a sudden you lose your ability, your time for having kids starts to run out. And when you're into your mid to late 40s, you basically lost it, unless you like froze your eggs or something. But even that starts getting risky. And I see women getting devastated by this, absolutely devastated by this, because it's only at that point do they really realize what they did. And I'm hoping that they can, once their voices enter into the fray, and there are strong men who have quit porn also speaking that message, I can see the hope for maybe sparing some of the future generations some of the hell that the current generations are going to have to go through, because it's not good now, and it's going to get even worse.
All right, guys, that's all I got this week. Thanks for hanging with us. Go ahead and check out the training below, because there's a limited number of spots left this month for the Self Mastery Club. So if you want to join the community, go ahead, click the link below in the description.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening, guys. My voice is about to give out. So wrap it up here. Ooh, yeah. See you all in the next one. Peace.